Thanks for sitting down today with us again.
And I know it's dinner, but we did just have eggs and bacon.
We did. Courtesy of you, by the way, I want to make that real known that you are the one with the hospitality today.
Well, I'm the one with the hunger, too.
It's a little practical,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes.
You know, I want to talk about the influence of women in our lives. Every man, woman, girl, boy are influenced by women. And when I think about the influence of women in my life, I think about, of course, my mother, Jane, you know? And when I think about what I learned about God and what I'm still learning about God, when I think of the ability to begin to accept myself and to love myself, which I think in turn has helped me to accept and love others more wholeheartedly, that comes from my mother, a large part of that. Who has been, is the most influential woman in your life?
Oh, my goodness. Well, of course, I would have to say my mother. And my grandmother Grant was a great cook, and she loved flowers. She was involved with a garden club. She knew so much about flowers. And my mother's mother loved men. But I saw women that followed their passions. And that was wonderful. And my great-grandmother had a fantastic laugh, just a chuckle that was always just gurgling underneath. And she lived until I was a junior in college. And she was always also humming under her breath, always humming, singing some old hymn. But that was in my programming. I do the same thing.
There's a project that you've been a part of that's called Faithful. And of course, it's celebrating a lot of women's voices today in today's culture, words, song, exploring the role of, the importance of, the contribution of women's voices in the story of Scripture, the story of God. What first attracted you to that project?
The opportunity for community. I had met Andrew Osanga, and I just said, I feel like I'm sort of in no man's land. But I just said, I want a community I can plug into. And I do have community, but a creative community, I'm 60. And so it's like, even people that started off doing what I was doing went on to other things. And so I had told Andrew, think of me. If you do something, please think of me. The first invitation was, hey, come be a think tank for a project we want to do. We were divided up in small groups, 2s and 3s, and given a woman to study in the Bible. Some of them were nameless. And I thought I knew my Bible pretty well, but I was like, who is she? What did she do? Her life is awful. We're supposed to write a song about this? Like, she's part of the epic story of God's love, but her chapter is not good. But then it makes you kind of, everything, you can't help it. You study one person's life and you go, oh, we have that similar, or we have that different, or you just consider the implications of what does it mean to be important, to be vital. How do we define a good life? It became a project I so wanted to share with other people. And I just, through personal invitations to people, would you please download this? I know it's a ticketed event, but the money that comes from this is actually going to help someone else. So I'm not afraid to ask. But and I had several women saying, spending an evening with women doesn't really sound good to me. And I said, I know.
Yeah, right.
But this is not who's had the boob job, who looks better, who's what, blah, blah, blah. This is really, you're gonna want to be in this circle. And everyone just said, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was going to say, in the culture that we're in, women being together can't always be simple. I can't speak from firsthand experience, but from observing women with women, that can be a really tough relationship. Some because of culture, like, how am I supposed to present myself? How many kids do I have and do that? I can't even have kids, or what does their, landscaping look like? I mean, there's a lot of comparative opportunities, if taken, that can really divide women. But what y'all have exampled here, really, I think about the early church too. Like, the early church exampled to us what the church could be and can be and should be all the way up till today, if we continue to evolve, well, not even evolve, but just continue to replicate that example. you women, you ladies in the Faithful Project, set an example that can then be experienced. You didn't just experience it, you set an example. So I think that's beautiful. I also think like tracing the voices of women throughout the story of God is beautiful, but I am curious, you as a woman, have you ever felt unseen or unheard?
Yeah, I don't know that I think the times that I felt the most unseen and unheard that were damaging to me, and there have been times when I was unwilling to see myself and to be honest and vulnerable about something that I was uncertain about, or that's what a weird answer. I just think sometimes doing what I felt like I was supposed to do, or the job that had been carved out for me, or I mean, by the time I graduated high school, I was already in it, and I feel like I wonder. I mean, I wouldn't go back and change anything, but I certainly did some things very poorly, made some awful mistakes. I think in all the busyness, there were probably a lot of times that just I just kind of barreled through life. I don't know. I mean, I remember being in therapy at Porter's Call, and like Al Andrews, the therapist, saying, "You at this age, tell me what you think about her." And I said, "I despise her. I despise her." And he said, "I want you now." I forget how old I was at this level of therapy. I think I was in my late 30s. "I want you to go stand beside her and put your arm around that earlier version of yourself. And I want you to say, you're not doing this by yourself. We're here now. I'm with you. And we'll consider things differently." It's weird. I mean, everything begins inside of us. And whatever message would make us not able to see ourselves, we're the perpetrator as well. And so I think the great thing about women being together is as soon as one says anything vulnerable, it's so refreshing. If it's a party of 5, 3 of the 5 will say, "I've been the same place." And I do think that's a unique wiring of women. I don't think women are wired for a pissing contest. I think we're wired for community. And so, as soon as somebody takes off that mask, everybody's like, "Oh God, I just wanted to get rid of that. Thank you." Women want to be seen for who they are with all their messiness and everything, if it's safe.
If it's safe is, of course, important, and each of us
Yes.
have to journey that and understand our boundaries around that, of course. But because there can be vulnerability for vulnerability's sake, not vulnerability for building up's sake. But that's a whole other conversation. The beginning is the ability, the willingness to be vulnerable. And I do feel that is one of women's great examples and opportunities in our culture is to teach the way of vulnerability and to teach and the courage that it requires to be vulnerable, and the beautiful benefit of being vulnerable is that exactly what you're saying, we learn we're not alone. And what do we most crave to know? I think is that we're not alone. So it's meeting a very deep desire in us. I want to kind of change course here for a second, but a vulnerable thing that happened to you or that you had to go through experience was open heart surgery. Tell me how you discovered that you were going to have to go under the knife.
I went to the doctor with Vince. He's 64. His dad died of a heart attack at 65. And I think anytime something's sort of in your gene pool, both my parents had dementia. Every time I can't find the keys, I'm like,
It's happening.
yeah. But yeah, so I just went with him after he'd done a battery of tests to be there to say whatever the doctors, just to support him. And Dr. John Bright Cage, he said, "Vince, exercise more, eat better, you're fine. I mean, believe it or not, your arteries are crystal clear." And I'm looking at him like, "Are you kidding?" He's like the sausage and bacon and cheeseburger man. It's genetics. But yeah, he said, "You're great." And then the doctor looked at me and said, "We need to get you checked out." And so
Were you like, what?
I didn't give it a second
Sure,
thought,
sure.
And yeah, I went in for some tests. I thought I was going to be on a treadmill. It was none of that, not the dreaded treadmill test. 2 days after the tests, I woke up to a message, "Call me." And anyway, and I called, and he was like, "Man, you're wired so uniquely on the inside." And it was the radiologist looking at, and yeah. And so he said, "But you have a thing that has to be fixed." So, been there my whole life.
And just never had any indicators that that's what was going on.
No. And he did say things like, Vince and I were there, and they were doing like an ultrasound. And I remember him saying, "Vince, this will be fine, 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 then catastrophic." And so, that word, I was over on the table, I was like, "What was that word?" But it wasn't until after the surgery, and there was an article in the newspaper when I turned 60, clearly nothing going on in Nashville on that day. But I am a hometown girl. But I was reading the article, and Dr. Cage said she would have been dead by 62. And all I thought was A+ for bedside manner. A+.
I mean, it's interesting. I think it was probably a few weeks afterwards, and we were texting or talking, and I remember just everything you articulated was so infused with this kind of, underlying peace and surrender. And what I'm curious about is, where do you find the freedom? Like, where does the freedom, the permission, even the courage come from to just truly open up your hands and say, all right, whatever you got, God, here we go.
Yeah. I'm thinking a lot of things right now. Knowing that at some point my body will fail. And being squarely in the third of my life, I'm looking at all kinds of things that I wonder, I want to use my imagination and creativity for how they could be different. And I think the real gift to me in facing something that could have been the end is it just reminded me that we all have just a certain amount of time. And this might just be something I have conjured up totally in my imagination, but my faith compels me to say, at whatever point somebody dies, if it's a heroic death or a tragic death or a violent death at the hands of somebody else, in my mind, I just, right on the other side of that last breath, is the arms of love saying, "Tap out, good job. Okay, no, you go on. All right, it's your turn. Now come on." Just like this ever-evolving story. And so through the death of loved ones, I've just had to say death is not the punishment. Death is just the end of this time tube. That's it. Not to be feared. Like somebody will say, what are the things on your bucket list you want to accomplish? That might be one way to look at it. But recently I've just been going, I want to really live fearlessly. I don't know what that means, but I don't know what that means. I've been praying most days of my life for half my life since I was 30. Lord, lead me today to those I need and those that need me, and let something I do have eternal significance. And, wouldn't it be amazing if we were all so intricately connected and we weren't responsible so much for each other as we were if we just welcomed each other, if we just made ourselves available, if we made what we have available. Not the responsibility to fix it, but, I feel like the little boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish, it was not his job. All he did was go, "I'm here, I got something." What a radical ripple effect would it be in a world of scarcity and fear if we were brave enough to just cannonball into the cesspool, and to what depth are we willing to be engaged? And I think as time gets less and less, we find ourselves going, did I leave it all on the table?
Yeah,
Did I
yeah.
leave it all in that race that I ran?
Well, in this chapter of your life, I would think, and I'm heading towards that eventually, hopefully, I think that's the beautiful perspective that you get to have having lived this length of life, is that you get to say, what am I holding on to it for? And therefore you're able to release it in a way that I probably still not quite developed enough, experienced enough, mature enough. I'm hoping if I can listen well, then I can learn well. And maybe before I get to 70, 80, before I'm at the very last stride, I can actually already be open and can already be extending and receiving too, because
Yes.
one of my issues is receiving. So,
I did think one thing.
okay.
This can be a PS. Is Jimmy Gentry, part of Highway 96 is named for him. I've said this so many times, but while he's still alive and he ever dies, I'm going to keep saying it. But, they're tiny lessons that change your life. And when my son Matt was in high school and I just couldn't figure out what I'd gone through a divorce. I was like, help me. And I drove out to see Jimmy. He's in his 90s now, but back then he just said in his Southern drawl, I'm going to give you 5 phrases, easy to remember. And I want you to say these phrases as often as possible to your son and to yourself and to everyone. Anyway, and he held up his big, old, gnarled hand. And he said, now, we're going to remember it by how many fingers I'm holding up. The first phrase I want you to know is, how can I help you? Say that as often as you can to your son and to yourself and to everybody. How can I help you? Now, fold your thumb down. Now, I'm proud of you, as often as you can to say that. He held out another finger. Now, you know what this phrase is. And I said, I love you. Yes. He said, 2 words? Now, thank you? And he said, yes. And he said, now this is the most important of all. That was Southern drawl. And I'm so crazy about him. And I was like, I want to get this right. I was like, Jesus. And he was like, no. Love. No, that's not it, Amy. Forgiveness. That's good, but that's not it. This is the most important one of all. And I just kept, the songwriter in me. Nope. Everything hangs on this one. And I said, I don't know what it is. And he said, we. That's the most important of all. Changes everything. Yeah. Houston, we have a problem.
Yes, exactly.
I'm
Not
up here
I
in the
have a
crowd.
problem.
I'm in the crowd. But I know.
Yeah.
I feel that way about the world politics, every table where we are seemingly on opposite sides. We have a problem.
Yeah.
My ex-husband, when we were first trying to find our way through, we need to learn reconciliation, and we have.
Isn't that interesting? We. Even in that most tense, and personal experience.
I know. When we look at it that way, we.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.